Hello YouTube, welcome back to the Shoe Shimmer, Shining with the Shimmer. And today I've got something really special for you guys. So I found this pair of Allen Edmonds on eBay for $4. And you might be thinking, wow, thanks for sharing this piece of junk, But I saw it as an opportunity for me to kind of experiment a little bit with renovating a pair of shoes, trying to get rid of the deep creases in the shoe, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So the first thing that I start out with is taking off the laces and getting a shoe tree inserted into the shoes. Now, the reason I'm taking off the laces, I ended up throwing these laces away. So I suppose I could have left them in, but it's just a good habit to take off your shoelaces when you're shining or you're doing any kind of work on your shoe, just so that you don't accidentally dye them or ruin them when you're using chemicals. In general, it's just a good idea to remove your shoelaces before you start. And so I'm trying to give you guys a pretty good look of the condition of these shoes. There's some severe scuffs on the front, on the tip of the toe, and other than that, there's just a lot of scrapes all over the shoe. The leather is coming up in a few different parts, as well as they're very dirty, really dirty shoe. At this point, I didn't have saddle soap, but eventually I'll upload a video of me using that, since I just acquired it not too long ago. And I go about taking the laces out, and here are my shoe trees. So I highly recommend getting a pair of these. I was actually gifted these, or not really gifted. They came with a pair of Carlos Santos that I ordered from a shop called A Fine Pair of Shoes, located over in the UK. And they're excellent. You can find the same type of cedar shoe tree for about $20 on Amazon. And they do the trick. They are much better than the regular split toe that's split right down the middle, cedar shoe trees. And so I highly recommend getting these. They're cheap. I think you could get 2 for $40 or 1 for $20 on Amazon. And so what we're going to do next is pour acetone over the creased parts of the shoe. And the reason we're doing this is to help the leather reform to the shape of the shoe tree. Now, I'm not sure of the exact physics, but essentially you want to insert a tight-fitting shoe tree. And what it's going to do is pouring acetone over it. As the acetone evaporates, it's going to help kind of like shrink the leather. And so the leather is going to tighten over the shoe tree. And so it's really important for this step to insert a shoe tree that's actually, very snug, if not just a little tight on the shoe tree. Otherwise, I've never poured acetone over a shoe without the shoe trees, but as you can imagine, if the leather is shrinking over the shoe tree and there's not a tight enough shoe tree inside, you're probably gonna end up ruining the shoe, because it's gonna shrink further than you might like. And so you can just pour it straight over the shoe, as you see me doing now. It evaporates really quickly, and if you want, you can kind of like rub over the creased parts of the shoe with just a cloth. I wouldn't recommend using your hand, because you're going to get a little bit of like a little bit of dye off on your fingers, or just polish or whatever you're going to be using. I wouldn't recommend rubbing it too much, simply because you're going to end up taking off a lot of dye, and then either you're going to have to re-dye the shoe, or you're just going to have a wonky looking shoe. And so just be judicious, I guess, in your application of the acetone. Just kind of pour it over the parts of the leather that you want to be reformed. And so I'm going to be doing this to both shoes. I believe I cut out the next one. And so you're going to let it dry. If you want, you can have a hair dryer to just help speed up the process. And now we're on to our next step. So what we're going to do now is apply Reno'mat to the shoe. Now, I forgot to actually brush off the shoes, but that's always a wise thing to do, just so that you're not trying to, get something off that could have easily been brushed off. And so the reason I'm applying the Reno'mat is to just take off any polishes that have accumulated on the surface, or waxes that have accumulated on the surface of the shoe, as well as, just remove any grime, any dirt, dust, anything that's not coming off with a good brushing. And that's why you want to use the Saphir Reno'mat before you move on to the next step of the shoe. Now, I don't recommend using Saphir Reno'mat every single time you polish your shoes. But again, if there's some dirt or if there's some kind of stain on your shoe, Reno'mat is the best way to go before you continue with the process. And so you don't want to use a tremendous amount of pressure, but you need to be using enough pressure so that you're actually removing things. And so I've just finished this first shoe, and this is just a good look at how it looks once it's been cleaned with the Reno'mat. You can still, you have a little mark right there, and I'm able to actually remove that by just focusing on that area. And that's the thing about Reno'mat. You don't have to apply it to the whole shoe if you don't need to. You can use it to just focus on individual areas, and see the blemish that was there is completely gone. And so you can still see a lot of the scratches and scuffs on the surface of the leather. That is not going to go away with Saphir Reno'mat, and you're going to continue to see that until I actually apply polish. So now I'm applying some mink oil. Again, I love mink oil. I recently shined shoes with a friend of mine, and we use Saphir Renovation. I personally don't own it. I actually got some Bic 4 leather conditioner, which I'd say is pretty similar to the Saphir Renovation, and the mink oil is much more solid than the Renovation. Renovation is really kind of like a lotion as far as its consistency, and I love mink oil. The more that you use it, the better off your shoe is going to be. And I don't necessarily recommend using it every time you shine your shoes. It's simply not needed. Some people only use it maybe like once a month, or maybe once every two to 3 weeks with heavy wear. But I use it a little bit more frequently than that, depending on how much I wear the shoes. But it's a conditioner. It's not going to harm your shoes. You spread it pretty thin. You don't want it to just be like caked on your shoe, as with any of these steps. You want to be spreading whatever you're putting on the shoe pretty thin, because really that's all the shoe needs. The leather is only going to take in so much, and once the leather has taken in, whether it's Renovation, mink oil, or even with the polishing step, once the leather is taken in as much as it can, anything else that you're putting on is kind of just a waste. And so when I move on to polishing, with these I applied 2 layers of polish. I applied polish once, and then I went back and I brushed them off, and then I polished a second layer of polish. And I typically don't do that, but because this pair was in such bad shape, I figured that it was probably a good thing to do. But regularly, I only apply 1 layer of polish. And the reason for that is that the shoe can only absorb a limited amount of polish. And once you're applying, a second or third coat, the shoe isn't going to be absorbing as much with each layer. And in my opinion, after the first layer, you're just increasing the chances that you're using too much polish and that you're wasting it. And for me, I'm trying to save as much polish as I can. I want to be a good steward of the things that I have. And that's why I typically stick to only 1 layer of shoe polish. Now, when you're applying polish, again, like I said before, you want to be spreading it thin across the entire surface of the shoe. Now, you want to make sure that the entire shoe is looking dull, and the reason for that is that's how you know that you've applied enough polish where, it's actually going into the leather, but you don't want it to look wet, because in that case, you've applied too much already. And so in the case that you have applied too much, I recommend just getting a cloth or a brush, possibly both if you have access to them, and brushing off the shoe and then wiping it down with a cloth, or wiping it down with a cloth first and then brushing it. And what that's going to do is that's just going to remove the excess polish that you've applied. Don't worry, you haven't ruined the shoe. Especially with polishes, you're going to be able to remove whatever you apply. If you accidentally apply a black polish to like a light brown shoe, you can go back with some Reno'mat and you're going to be able to remove that. So with most steps, unless we're talking about acetone, you're going to be able to fix any mistakes that you've done. If you remove too much polish or too much color with Reno'mat, typically going over a spot with some additional polish is going to fix the problem. Just the same as going over a mistakenly polished area with Reno'mat is going to remove any mistakes that you've created. And so, yeah, just have an attitude of, this is a project. This is something that you're going to be able to, go back and fix your mistakes. And as I was saying before, if you are using acetone to like strip the leather of its dye, that's when you start going into the area of, this is kind of permanent. Once you remove the dye, no amount of polish or Renovation or leather lotion is really going to reverse that. You're going to have to go back and re-dye the shoe. And so with acetone, practice the most, care with it. With Reno'mat, you don't have to worry about it as much. But again, compared to polish, you need to be more careful with it. And then with the leather conditioners, Renovation, Bic 4, mink oil, those are kind of the things where, you don't have to be as careful with how much you apply. It's not going to ruin the shoe. Sometimes people have said that Renovation and mink oil may darken the shoe. But honestly, I've never seen that in any of the shoes that I've ever polished. And I've polished a lot of shoes, Allen Edmonds, Carlos Santos, Magnani, now very recently some Mirman, and I've never had that problem. And so, not to say that you won't come across it, but it's extremely rare if it ever does occur. And this is the finished product. This is the product of your labors. And, you're going to reap what you sow. If you follow these steps, if you take your time, you're going to end up with a really nicely polished shoe. It's going to look great. And if you have any problems ever, just pull up a video and just follow along with whoever's polishing. As always, this is the Shoe Shimmerer, and don't forget to like, subscribe, check out my Instagram. I have more content there, and see you next time.